T9C got the fucking juice.
Silver's the new gold.
It takes this shit serious.
T9C got the fucking juice.
Silver's the new gold.
It takes this shit serious.
What's going on, everyone? Welcome back to another episode of JT Sports Live. I'm your host, JT. And I don't know if you guys feel something different in the air like I did when I was outside a couple of minutes ago, but you know, there's a different feeling in the air that I didn't feel a couple of weeks ago when it feels like it's football season. Week 0 gave us a little bit of a taste of what's to come for the 2024 college football season, but the NFL season is going to be chaotic as well, and football season is officially in full swing. And over here at JT Sports, man, we got to make sure that you're up to date with everything that's going on in the football world. And just a little quick programming update. We now are going to be going live at 5:45 Eastern Time. Don't really know the days for certain, but I will let you guys know as we progress throughout the next couple of days, because it's hard to schedule everything right now because the NFL season kicks off in 2 weeks. So I plan on going live Saturday nights late after the 8 o'clock college football game to give my reactions instead of just waiting until Monday night to do so. And I'm also going to be going live after the Sunday night football games to give my reactions and thoughts on some of the NFL action from that Sunday, just so I can do a better job of giving my specific audiences. Like if you just care about college football, then you can tune in for the college football only live streams on my Saturday reaction show, and same thing with my NFL audience. And then of course throughout the weekdays, Mondays, Tuesdays, Wednesdays, we'll end up doing both NFL college football split live streams. But I got a really good episode for you guys today. Florida State, they suffered a really shocking loss to Georgia Tech. And in that loss, a lot of things got exposed. And one of them is the lack of trust that Florida State has in their quarterback, DJ Uiagalelei. We're going to talk about that. Everybody is wrong about Shedeur Sanders, man. I don't know what a lot of the haters out there see, but this, without a doubt, is a lock to be a first-round pick and the future franchise quarterback in the NFL. Colorado kicks off their season against North Dakota State, the FCS powerhouse. Are they in trouble? Could they end up suffering the same fate as FSU, falling in upset fashion? A lot has been made about Florida's home field advantage going into their game against Miami, but I got to explain to you guys why the swamp isn't going to save Florida from the L that they have coming to them this Saturday. Alabama stole somebody's kicker, man. Don't know how many of you guys have been keeping up with that, but I think this situation is a sign of the new age of college football and the slow death of the group of five as we know it. And on the NFL side of things, who are the most overhyped, underrated teams going into this year? I'm going to be revealing them. I got thoughts on Caleb Williams, Anthony Richardson. You're making a big risk if you plan on drafting him as your QB1 for fantasy football this year. Are the Texans the new #1 team in the AFC this year? We're going to be discussing those things and more. But before we get into it, shout out to everybody in the chat. Shout out to the Shaded Asylum. He says, the fan side of me wants Miami to win, but the betting side of me is taking UF. Shout out to King Malik with the Gator emoji. Shout out to my guy, Robert Turner. Shout out to my dude, Will Morris. Shout out to everybody that's tuned in on X, YouTube, wherever you're watching. Do yourself a favor. Hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, turn on notifications if you haven't already so you don't miss when we go live and upload new content. And remember that we're not just a YouTube channel, we are a podcast. You can find this episode and all of our previous ones in audio format, wherever you get your podcast from. Apple, Spotify, Amazon, the JT Sports Podcast is available. If you have any questions that you would like answered on a future episode, you can send them in the DMs on Instagram at JT_Sports_ and on X at JT___. And before we dive into it all, here's a quick word from our sponsor, Aura. In football, we all know that no quarterback can win without good protection up front. It's also important that you protect yourself from data brokers who sell your personal information online to scammers, spammers, and anybody else who may want to target you. That's why you should use Aura, today's sponsor of this episode. Aura shows which data brokers are passing away your information on the internet and automatically submits opt-out requests on your behalf. Go to aura.com/JTsports in description or pin comment down below to get a 14-day free trial and protect your personal information from being exposed online. Cleaning up your information online not only helps reduce the amount of spam you receive, but it also protects you from hackers who could use this info to help gain access into your social media accounts, bank accounts, or other sensitive information. Go to our sponsor, aura.com/JTsports in description or pin comment down below to gain access to your 14-day free trial and protect yourself from hackers looking to gain access into your sensitive information online. Okay, everybody. So the first thing I want to talk about is We all saw Florida State go down to Georgia Tech. It was the first upset to kick off the 2024 college football season, and Georgia Tech exposed some major problems with Florida State this year. The most obvious one is that Florida State obviously doesn't trust DJ Uiagalelei at quarterback. Their game plan offensively against Georgia Tech was really conservative and pedestrian. They wanted to run the football and not ask DJ U to have to win the game by himself. And unfortunately, after the first drive for FSU, Georgia Tech completely erased the ground game from FSU's arsenal. And they forced this team to become one-dimensional. And when they were asking DJ U to throw the football, they weren't asking him to take too many shots deep. And once we got into halftime, there was a really ugly stat line that DJ U posted. He was 12 of 14 and had negative 0.1 air yards. And that shows you the lack of faith and trust that Florida State's coaching staff has, not only in DJ Uiagalelei's ability to throw the football, but their whole entire passing attack. They're lacking talent and depth at wide receiver. Their offensive line isn't that good in pass protection. And with the lack of faith that we saw in DJ U against Georgia Tech from this FSU coaching staff, that's pretty much a key tell to show you that they don't have faith that they can be able to be balanced on offense. If Florida State is going to replicate the year that they had in 2023, they need this rushing attack to carry the load for this offense. And they got a lot of great backs on that team. They're like three guys deep at that position. And with how good their offensive line is at creating holes in the run game, them being able to win, being a run-first team, is definitely something that has a great chance of being able to happen if you can get better quarterback play out of DJ Uiagalelei. But the thing with DJ U is that Seminole fans were coming into this season already knowing that this dude wasn't that good. How he played against Georgia Tech wasn't a surprise if you watch DJ U the last 3 to 4 years that he's been playing college ball. He's somebody that he makes bad decisions with the football occasionally. He has a great arm. He can throw the football with the best of them, but his accuracy is very hot and cold in certain stretches of games, and you got to cross your fingers anytime you have to play from behind with DJ U at quarterback, because he's not the kind of player that is going to be able to carry you to a win consistently. There's going to be some games where he may be able to make a couple of big throws to keep you in the ball game, maybe potentially win it, but he also is going to have moments where the game's on the line and he's going to choke. And with DJ U playing quarterback for the Seminoles this year, every game is going to be like what you saw against Georgia Tech. It's going to be close. It's going to be a dogfight. The only teams that Florida State are going to beat by multiple possessions this year are the crappy teams that they have on their schedule. Let's say they play one of those jabroni teams from the FCS that you paid to blow out, or if they play a lower tier team in the ACC this year. Those are the teams that Florida State is going to dominate because they can run the football at will against them. But when they go up against quality teams like Georgia Tech, SMU, Miami, they're going to struggle to be able to win those games because DJ U isn't that good in those big time matchups. At Oregon State last year, against all the top 25 teams they played up against, he never completed once over 60% of his passes in any of those matchups. When you look at the film of DJ U against Georgia Tech, you see somebody that Florida State put a lot of shackles on him because they didn't want to ask him to do too much, because they know when you put too much on DJ U's plate, he ends up not being able to deliver for you, and you need to have a good supporting cast around him to help pull him up. He's a capable quarterback if you got an elite team around him. Florida State doesn't have that kind of team. This team was extremely overrated all this offseason. Too many people were judging this year's FSU team solely based off the season that they had last year. But you can't base Florida State and what they are this year solely based off one of the best seasons that they had in over a decade. Because for me to see you as a consistent 10-win plus program, you got to show that you can win 10 games more than just one time. It has to be consistent. You got to go 2-3 straight seasons being able to win double-digit games before you can be claimed as a lock to be a 10-win plus program every year. Florida State doesn't recruit at that level. Last year, their recruiting class was ranked 13th in the nation. To be one of those programs to avoid having to rebuild like what they're going to do this year, you got to recruit at a way higher level than what you're doing right now. When you are a portal-heavy team, that's good if you want to have a good one-off season. But a lot of teams that rely heavy on the portal to assemble their rosters, they normally end up having a big decline the following year. Remember Mel Tucker that year early into his Michigan State tenure where they went to the New Year's Six Bowl and they beat Pittsburgh? They were led by Kenneth Walker that season. When Kenneth Walker left and a lot of those portal players from that season were gone as well, you saw Michigan State regress and eventually Mel Tucker got fired. Year one, Lincoln Riley at USC. They won 11 games. The following year, they had 7 wins, which is the worst season that Lincoln Riley has ever had as a head coach. Assembling your team through the portal is not sustainable if that is the basis of how your team is constructed. You got to have a good mix of recruiting to go along with utilizing the portal well to be able to sustain success with this model. Florida State hasn't developed a quarterback that they've gotten solely through recruiting. And with DJ U now, you're hoping that this coaching staff and Mike Norvell are good enough and have bright offensive minds that are high enough to help be able to do something that no other coach DJ U has played under has been able to do, and that's help him reach that next level. This guy was the #1 quarterback prospect out of his recruiting class years ago. He was rated over CJ Stroud. He was a 5-star QB coming out of St. Bosco. I remember watching QB1 Beyond the Lights a few years ago, and they were following around this dude named Real Mitchell. And Real Mitchell eventually got benched his senior season in favor of DJ U. And the dude was a baller in high school. And from a physical standpoint, he has all the tools to be great. Great arm, pretty good athlete. But he hasn't been able to put it all together. And at this point, you're in like your 10th season of playing college football. You are what you are at this point. And your supporting cast isn't Georgia or Ohio State level to help improve him and help carry him. So FSU is at an extreme disadvantage with the fact that you don't have a quarterback, or you have a quarterback who you can't trust in big moments, and you don't have a dude who's transcended enough to carry you to a win when everything else around him is going awry. Remember Bryce Young's couple of seasons at Alabama? He carried Bama. We've never seen an Alabama quarterback as good as what Bryce Young was. Anytime he had a chance to win a game for Bama and he was on the field, he always came through. DJ U doesn't have that same aura. When you look at DJ U, you're like, dude, like, you're mid at best. You feel me? Sometimes he has his moments, but FSU this year, it's pretty evident they don't trust DJ U, and you just wonder how many games can they skate by with him at QB. They're not going to be garbage, but they're not going to be as good as what they were last year. There's going to be a good amount of games that they win that are going to be really close, because that's the kind of QB DJ U is. He won't outright lose you a game per se. He won't get you blown out, but he definitely is going to make every win a heart-wrenching game, And they're going to be close wins that Florida State's going to have due to his inconsistency versus if you had a better quarterback, then you probably dominate a lot of the schools who you probably struggle to beat this year. There's a good chance maybe they lose to Boston College next week. Shedeur Sanders is the most overhated player in football right now. College football fans, NFL fans don't feel like this dude is as good as what the media hypes him up to be. But to me, he's a lock to be a first-round pick. And I really don't understand why so many folks out there are low on Shedeur Sanders in terms of his NFL prospects, because this is somebody who has everything that it takes to be a franchise quarterback in the National Football League. He's accurate on all three levels. He has great touch on his deep balls. He has really good pocket awareness. He maneuvers inside of the pocket really well. He's good at avoiding pressure. He has good decision making. Shedeur Sanders, behind the worst offensive line in college football, had one of the best touchdown to interception ratios, 27-3 in America. You will be really hard pressed to find another quarterback who could produce at the level that Shedeur was able to, pretty much playing behind the worst offensive line in college football, along with the worst team in the nation. If you took Shedeur off last year's Colorado squad, they go winless and they get blown out in every single game. When he got injured against Washington State, that game was uncompetitive when he wasn't in. And against Utah, the offense couldn't even move the ball past the 50. With how tough Shedeur is and his clutchness, the aura that he has in the fourth quarter, he's one of those quarterbacks that no matter what, you know, if you have a chance to win the game with the ball in his hands, he's always going to come through for you. His last name is not the reason why he's getting so much hype and attention from the media. He's getting talked about so much because he's the most polarizing quarterback in the history of college football due to the legacy that he has from his father. There are high expectations that people have for Shedeur Sanders, and everybody is interested in seeing if he's able to live up to the bloodline that he has inside of his DNA, being Deion's son. But if you're one of those people that are saying that Shedeur isn't worth the first round pick, he's only projected to be a top 10 pick because of his last name, you don't know what the fuck you're talking about. And I don't mean to say that in a demeaning factor, but if you watch Shedeur Sanders play against TCU, UCLA, Oregon State, when he's able to get time to throw the football, he's a really effective quarterback. He may not be the most physically gifted quarterback. He's not a super athlete, doesn't have a super arm. But in terms of knowing the game of football, having a high IQ, being able to run the offense, playing within structure, these are qualities that translate well from the college game to the pro game. Being able to throw with good anticipation, being able to get balls in between tight windows and man-to-man coverage. Shedeur can make all the throws. He knows the game. This is somebody who trains with Tom Brady. Do you think just anybody can train with Tom Brady? I don't think so. You got to be pretty special for Tom Brady to want to take you under his wing and want to tutor you and mentor you to help you become a better quarterback. His processing is A1. There are a lot of things to love about Shedeur. The character concerns are mildly overblown. He is not a bad leader. I went to school with LaJohntay Western, who played at Florida Atlantic the last couple of years. He was the best player on FAU's offense last season. He went in the portal and reached out to Shedeur to play for Colorado. He flew pretty much all his teammates out to Houston to come train with him. He's donated money to charities. He also has helped out teammates, giving them a little bit of his NIL cash. The locker room cancer claims about Shedeur Sanders are false. He has not been a locker room distraction in Colorado. His teammates have nothing but great things to say about him. People are trying to base who they think Shedeur Sanders is as a person based off salty players who are mad because Shedeur Sanders didn't give them any slice of his NIL revenue because they felt like they were owed something by Shedeur. Stop buying in to these false BS narratives that these haters on social media, I can't even call them haters. I really think you got to be a troll if you can seriously watch Shedeur Sanders and tell me with a straight face without laughing that this dude isn't first round material. I get that everybody has the right to their own opinion, but it shouldn't be a conversation about Shedeur Sanders and where he's going to end up getting drafted next year's draft. He should be the first player taken off the board. I think he's better than Carson Beck, but I don't think the gap between the two is that big. But Shedeur Sanders has that aura that you see in the franchise quarterback. There are certain players that you just see play at the college level and you just know that they're going to be successful in the NFL. I see nothing but a bright future for Shedeur Sanders moving forward. Not just this upcoming college football season, but also when he declares for the NFL draft. He's going to have a bright career at the next level because all the intangibles that you need to succeed in the NFL, Shedeur has. Accuracy, good pocket awareness, high IQ, and good decision making. He's clutch. Those are the four most important traits that you have to be successful in the NFL. Shedeur has everything that it takes to be a high-end quarterback in the National Football League. And this nonsense of him not being the first-round pick is really idiotic. Some of y'all need to go to your eye doctor and get your eyes checked because something may not be right with your vision. I'm trying to tell you, Shedeur Sanders is going to be the next big thing. And if your NFL team that you root for, or the favorite team that you root for in the NFL needs a quarterback, you should be rooting for them to tank for Shedeur Sanders because he's one of those quarterbacks who can come in and change the franchise. Shout out to everybody that's tuned in on YouTube and X. Shout out to my guy Robert Turner, my guy Will Morris, King Malik. Shout out to everybody that's tuned in. Remember that we aren't just a YouTube channel, we are a podcast. If you are enjoying this episode so far, do me a favor, give us a 5-star review on Apple and Spotify. When you do, your favorite team, college football and NFL, will have good luck this year. And if you don't, the favorite team that you root for is probably going to end up having a disappointing season. So if you want your team to have a good year, give the JT Sports Podcast a 5-star review on Apple and Spotify. The links to the Apple and Spotify versions of the podcast are in the description down below. Colorado is set to kick off their season opening up against the FCS powerhouse North Dakota State. Now, they, a few weeks ago, started out as a 7.5-point favorite, but over the last couple of weeks, the point spread has started to gone up in favor of Colorado. They now are a 10-point favorite for this matchup, and I don't see how Colorado doesn't win this game. Could this be a close game, potentially? Yes, it could if everything goes left for the Buffs. But this North Dakota State team is not the team that most people think that they are. You see, the narrative around North Dakota State is that there's some juggernaut team from the FCS. They have been a dynasty in that level of Division I for over a decade, but they recently lost Mike Entz, who was their head coach the last couple of years. He took a job to be on Lincoln Riley's staff. So you got a new head coach in this game for North Dakota State. You do have a pretty talented team. You got some good wide receivers. You got some questions in the secondary, but on the interior of your D-line, O-line, you're pretty up to snuff there. But the Colorado team that the Bison are going to be seeing in this game is not the same team that only won 4 games last year. I don't know why everybody is just stuck on Colorado being a 4-win team when this is a completely different and better team than what they had last year. You got an improved offensive line. You got one of the best wide receiving cores in college football. Colorado is 4-6 guys deep at wide receiver. And you're going to be able to spread the football all over the field with Shedeur at quarterback. North Dakota State doesn't have the depth in the secondary to be able to minimize how effective Colorado is going to be throwing the football in this matchup. Does the rushing attack have to be there for Colorado to win this game? No, it doesn't. They don't really need to run the football at all unless they get up big in this game and they need to be able to take time off the clock. Even if North Dakota State has some athletes on their defense, you just playing at that level aren't going to be deep enough to be able to keep Colorado's offense from scoring less than at least 28 points in this game. If North Dakota State has any shot at pulling off this upset, they need their offense to be able to go point for point with Colorado, which definitely could happen because I'm higher on Colorado's offense this year than I am their defense. Their defense has much to prove. They do have a new defensive coordinator who comes from that Lou Anarumo coaching tree. For those of you guys who aren't familiar with Lou Anarumo, he's one of the best defensive coordinators in the NFL, and Colorado's defensive coordinator was on his staff for the last couple of years. You got a new DC in there that has NFL experience. You could see some exotic looks from Colorado's defensive front, and you're more talented on your D-line this year than what you were in 2023. Colorado's pass rush was abysmal. They should be able to get after North Dakota State's quarterback. North Dakota State does have a pretty good offensive line. This will be a pretty good test to see just how far along Deion has come with developing that front seven of the Buffs defense. They also have had Warren Sapp working exclusively with that defensive line. He's a coach on this staff as well. I think for Colorado, where you could find yourself getting in trouble in this game is if your defense isn't able to come away with key stops. I don't think North Dakota State is going to get shut out in this game. They're like 9-3 against FBS opponents since 2010. Their recent win against a FBS team came in 2016 against Iowa. So they're not a slouch, and this definitely is a good test for Colorado to start the season out with. Because if you dominate North Dakota State, the narrative is going to be, well, you were supposed to blow out this team. And that is true. But if you struggle to pull out a win, then maybe the hype for you maybe winning 8, potentially 10 games is a little bit too high. Because if you're as good as a team as what Deion expects to be, which they're not going to be okay with just winning 8, 9 games. That would be major improvement. They would overachieve. But Deion and that staff down there truly believe that they have everything that it takes to win the Big 12 and push for a playoff spot this year. So if they are that team that they believe they will be this year, this is going to be the first exam to determining just how far Colorado can go this year. They say that you can't make conclusions off of week 1, and that's true if you're talking about the NFL, but in college football, oftentimes what you are early defines what you're going to be this season. So this game, this performance that we see out of Colorado against North Dakota State is going to define the team that we will see out of this squad for the entirety of this season. And if they blow out North Dakota State, there's no question in my mind that this is going to be a team that can compete for the Big 12 title. But if this is a slugfest and North Dakota State keeps it close and Colorado has to barely survive with the win, I have major concerns about Deion year 2 down there in Boulder. But I'm taking Colorado to cover that 10-point spread. I believe that they should win by at least 2 touchdowns. North Dakota State is going to put up points on Colorado. All right? But I don't feel they have the depth nor the firepower to consistently be able to match Colorado point for point. They may be able to keep up with them for the first half, but eventually the talent that Colorado has brought in this year, and this being a more improved team, is going to prevail. And I like the Buffs to win 38-27 38-20 is going to be my final score prediction for this game. Give me Colorado with the 18-point win. I don't know how many of you guys have heard about this, but Miami of Ohio's head coach called out Alabama for stealing their kicker. And this was really funny to me because it shows what the future of the G5 is in college football. And that pretty much is they're one step closer to death. For the people out there that have these dreams, these fantasies about a G5 team potentially being able to win a national championship, those dreams should be officially erased from your mind, because there's no chance of a group of 5 school ever being able to win the national championship. And this situation with Alabama stealing Miami of Ohio's kicker is the perfect reason why. Because you're never going to see another 2011 Boise State or 2017 UCF or 2020 Cincinnati, because those squads are never going to be able to construct the roster that good, because anytime they get some halfway decent players, you're going to have schools like Alabama who come in and illegally tamper, hit those guys up in the DMs on X and say, hey, like, if you come to Alabama, we can pay you a bigger bag. We can give you a better chance to make it to the next level. If you are this kicker from Miami of Ohio, why would you stay loyal to this low-level MAC team? Like, MAC teams are some of the worstly funded programs in college sports. They don't get a lot of support from their alumni. They don't get that much funding from their conference to be able to compete at the level as the bigger schools in college football. And when you have players who commit out of high school or transfer to these G5 programs, especially the teams that are playing in the MAC, they're not looking at that situation as a chance to be able to grow and help the team. They're looking at that situation as a stepping stone to where if they do what they're supposed to do, then they will have the opportunity to take a step up in competition once they hit the portal after the season. And with Alabama having way more resources than what Miami of Ohio does. Hell, I kind of forgot that there was 2 Miamis. When I think of Miami football, I think of the Miami Hurricanes. You don't really think about the Miami Redhawks. The only person I know from there that's notable that played in the NFL was Big Ben Roethlisberger. And Alabama being able to go in, steal their kicker, you know what hurts if you're the head coach of that program, because it now gives you less incentive to want to take a job this low level, because it's hard to keep all your best players when you have to try to stop them from getting more incentivized to go play for a bigger program. And this is the perfect reason with Alabama stealing this kicker from this random low-level G5 school to why you're never going to see a group of 5 team win a national championship. Even if Memphis, Boise State, or Tulane get into the new expanded playoffs this year, they don't have no shot in hell of being able to make it out of the first round, because the talent between them and the rest of the other schools that they're going to be matched up against is too big for them to have a shot at pulling off the upset. They're not even a quality team. There are no quality G5 schools. You see, the problem that the problem with the group of 5 that fans seem to ignore is that they seem to have this thinking that there's always going to be a 2011 or 2020 Cincinnati, when in reality, those G5 teams that have that kind of talent probably come around only 2 or 3 times a decade. And with this new era of college football, with the transfer portal pretty much being the equivalent to what free agency is in the NFL, it's pretty much every player is up for grabs if they're being, bribed by a school like Alabama with superior resources to leave their current G5 to come play at a higher level. So for Miami of Ohio's head coach, I feel for him. It hurts. I don't more so think that he was complaining. I feel he more so was just venting his frustrations, because why would you want to be a head coach in a G5 when it's hard to sustain a level of success at that level, because you're never going to be able to keep your best players because they're always going to get stolen away from you from a school like Alabama. Anytime I talk to a Florida fan about this Miami game that they're going to be playing in week 1, the first thing they tell you with why they're going to beat the Hurricanes is that, well, they're playing in the swamp, right? And I want to talk to you guys about the big lie Florida fans are throwing out there entering this week 1 game against Miami. And this whole narrative that they're playing in a swamp and they got home field advantage and that's the main reason why they're going to beat Miami is BS, because Florida under Billy Napier is 4-4 at home against Power 4 opponents. And last year, they lost to Arkansas, who was one of the worst teams in the SEC, by the way, at home. They also lost to LSU at home. Florida in 2024 is not what they used to be back in the glory days of Urban Meyer and Tim Tebow from 2008 to 2009, when they damn near were unstoppable and impossible to beat at home. In the year 2024 now, it's not hard to beat Florida in the swamp. Some Gator fans are making it seem like they're on this 3-year winning streak at home when Miami is more than equipped to be able to win this game no matter where it will be played at. No matter if you were playing this in a neutral site setting or with it being played in a swamp, Miami still has a great chance to win because Billy Napier is 2-10 against ranked opponents during his time being a head coach at Florida. Mario Cristobal is being heavily disrespected in terms of him being compared to Billy Napier when there really is no comparison. Mario Cristobal has accomplished way more throughout his coaching career up to this point than what Billy Napier has. Mario Cristobal is no stranger to winning big road games. When he was at Oregon, he went on the road and beat Ohio State, who was the 3rd-ranked team in the nation at that time, and Columbus, being down 2 of his best players that year. He's won the Pac-12 championship. He's won the Rose Bowl. You can try to demean his resume all you want to because he did it in the Pac-12, but no matter what, his resume, his achievements still standing. He's more accomplished as a head coach than what Billy Napier is. Billy Napier sucks against ranked teams. Mario Cristobal has a pretty decent record against top 25 opponents. Let's not get this misunderstood that Miami is the more talented team than what Florida is entering this game. And we make it seem like Miami is traveling from the West Coast to play Florida when they play in the same state. The humidity is going to be too tough for Miami to handle. What's the difference between the humidity in Gainesville and the humidity in South freaking Florida? If anything, South Florida is more scorching hot than what it is in Gainesville. Miami is a Florida team. They play in the same state. Them playing in the swamp is not going to be a big adjustment. They practice in these conditions all off season, all throughout spring, all throughout fall camp. They are more than prepared to beat Florida in the swamp. Cam Ward should torch Florida secondary. Florida addressed their secondary through the portal. They bring in Aja Turner, who was a starter at Washington. You also got Cormani McClain. I don't know if he's even going to suit up for this game, but their secondary was a big liability last year. Not only were they lacking talent at corner, and safety outside of Castell, who was an SEC freshman All-American. But they had a lot of blown coverages with assignments due to Austin Armstrong being their defensive coordinator. Now, if this defense takes the next step under Austin Armstrong and they are night and day better this season than what they were year one under him, then this definitely could be a secondary that could slow down Miami's passing attack. But Cam Ward is one of the most efficient quarterbacks in college football. He was putting up great numbers at Washington State when Washington State had nobody. Washington State didn't have a single NFL wide receiver that Cam Ward was throwing the football to. And Florida fans are extremely underrating how good Cam Ward is. Some of y'all need to stop putting on this facade that you've been watching a lot of Cam Ward footage, because you're lying. You mean to tell me that you were up at 1 o'clock, 12 o'clock in the morning on the East Coast watching the Washington State Cougars play? Stop the cap, man. Be honest, you were not up that late watching Cam Ward play at Washington State. Most of you guys are going to get your first glance of how good Cam Ward is when he ends up torching and setting this Florida defense on fire. Miami is super deep at wide receiver. They got a great offensive line. And you also have Damian Martinez at running back. So let's say Florida does have the ability to slow down the pass somewhat. Miami can throw a curveball at them and start going to pound town on the ground with Damian Martinez. He was the second best running back out of this transfer portal cycle, only second to Quinshon Judkins. He was putting up fantastic numbers at Oregon State. You give him a Miami offensive line sharing a backfield with Cam Ward, he's going to absolutely punish Florida's run defense. And their run defense was a huge problem last year. Now, they did bring in some good players from the portal who should help improve that, like Joyce Slackman, who was the Ivy League Player of the Year at Penn. You have an improved group of linebackers, but you don't know if all of that is actually going to come to fruition in this game, because we don't know if Austin Armstrong is a good defensive coordinator. And Florida has struggled to find good defensive coordinators for the last couple of years. I mean, we don't want to bring up Todd Grantham. I know Florida fans hate when you hear that name, but there are more questions about Florida in this game than there are Miami. The only question that most people seem to have about Miami is, well, can Mario Cristobal be trusted to get the win? We got to stop defining Mario Cristobal off the Georgia Tech fiasco. We know that it was an awful decision not to kneel the ball at the end of that game. We understand that. You don't have to keep screaming at us about that. But if you're going to hold Mario Cristobal in the light that he's just this bad coach because of that Georgia Tech loss, then what is Billy Napier? Because if Mario Cristobal is bad, then Billy Napier is absolute garbage. Because Billy Napier, being the head coach at Florida, you don't expect them to ever lose to Vanderbilt, no matter how much they are derived of talent. You should always beat Vanderbilt. You should always be able to beat the bottom feeders that you play in the SEC, especially at home. But you lost to Arkansas last year at home. You got concerns about Austin Armstrong as your defensive coordinator. You got concerns on your offensive line. You got concerns in the secondary. You haven't recruited better than Miami under Billy Napier. Every year, Mario Cristobal has been in South Beach. Miami has had a top 10 recruiting class. Florida has yet to bring in a top 10 class under Napier. Miami has utilized the portal better than Florida. If you go position by position, comparing Miami's team to Florida's roster, Miami clears Florida in every area. The only position where things are a little bit equal is the secondary, because Miami's concerns at that position are just as big as what Florida's concerns are when it comes to their secondary. But I give Miami the benefit of a doubt because they have a better, more proven defensive coordinator going into this game than what Florida has on their sideline with Austin Armstrong. Mario Cristobal doesn't call the plays. Shannon Dawson does, and he's a pretty good offensive coordinator. Billy Napier still calls the plays for Florida's offense, and that's the biggest gripe that many Gators fans have about Florida, is that their offense looks too conservative. They struggle to generate explosive plays, and that's due to the lackluster play calling that we've seen out of Billy Napier. We keep talking about the Georgia Tech fiasco when Billy Napier is the same coach who got penalized for having 13 men on the field. When we talk about the coaching advantage in this game, it's not as small as what people are making it out to be. There is a pretty good gap between Mario Cristobal and Billy Napier, because Mario Cristobal is no stranger to being in these kinds of games. He has a better record against top 25 opponents than what Billy Napier has. Billy Napier is 2-10 against ranked opponents. That's awful. And you mean to tell me with a record like that, you can trust Billy Napier to pull off the win? Playing at home in the swamp, the same place that you lost to Arkansas at last year? Playing in the swamp isn't going to save Florida from the butt whooping that they have coming to them this Saturday. There is a Category 5 hurricane that is about to come through the swamp and absolutely tear that stadium up to shreds, because after this game, Miami's going to do Florida a favor. They're going to show everybody, including that fan base and the guys in that organization, that Billy Napier isn't the guy. And if you lose to Miami, think about the pressure that you're going to have going into that UCF game. If you go 0-2 against your two biggest competitors in the state, you got no choice but to fire Billy Napier, because you don't want to risk embarrassing yourself, losing to DJU in Florida State and going 0-3 in state. I don't see the swamp saving Florida against Miami, and the swamp proving to be this big advantage that Florida has at their disposal to win this game when they haven't done a good job of defending their home turf. They only play good at home when they're going up against jabroni teams that they pay to beat, like McNeese State and all these other random schools. But when you see a Power 4 team come in there, they end up not being as dominant. They are 4-4 at home against Power 4 teams, and Billy Napier, entering his third season at Florida, is 2-10 against ranked squads. Who do you trust more? The coach who went on the road and beat Ohio State in Columbus? The coach that has won a major Power 5 title, has won a New Year's Six bowl game, or a head coach that went 5-7, losing to Arkansas and using the excuse that we don't have enough talent when you play at Florida? When you're coaching at Florida, you should never have a losing season, considering how easy it is to recruit with the location advantage that you have. I got Miami winning this thing. 31-20 is going to be my final score prediction for this game. I don't see how Miami loses to Florida, no matter where they end up playing at. You could be playing this game in the parking lot for all I care, and Miami would still have the better chance to win. Before we move on to the NFL segment of this live stream, shout out to everybody that's tuned in, wherever you're watching, YouTube, X. I appreciate you for watching. Hit that like button, or your favorite team is going to have bad luck this season. Subscribe, share the live stream, give us a follow if you're listening on X, and rate the podcast 5 stars on Apple and Spotify. If you enjoy, the link is down in the description down below, or you can go to whichever you get your podcast from and give us a 5-star review by typing in the JT Sports Podcast. I want to break down who are the most overhyped and underrated teams entering the upcoming 2024 NFL season. The New York Jets, I'm going to start off with them. The Jets are extremely overhyped, not because they can't make it to the playoffs, but because they're still is a large group of folks out there who see the Jets as a Super Bowl contender. And there's no chance in hell the Jets are going to make it any further than the divisional round. When you get into the playoffs, it's a different season from what the regular season is. And the teams that make deep playoff runs are teams that not only are talented, but also have great coaching. And Robert Saleh hasn't shown that he's a good coach. And you got Nathaniel Hackett as your offensive coordinator, who is only employed because of his relationship with Aaron Rodgers. And the New York Jets have just had way too much offseason drama going on between Aaron Rodgers missing mandatory minicamp to go do drugs, Hassan Reddick, you trade for him despite knowing that he wanted to get paid, he wanted a new contract, and he wasn't going to show up until he got that, but yet you still proceed to make the trade anyway, and now he comes out and demands a trade despite never stepping foot in the New York Jets facilities. You know, things like this are why I can't see the Jets being a Super Bowl team. You don't hear of Super Bowl teams having this much drama and this much dysfunction inside their organization in the offseason. When you see a team make a deep playoff run, everybody's bought in, one team, one goal, and there just is way too much going on with the Jets for me to see them being anything more than a second round playoff exit. And that's why I see the Jets being overrated this year and overhyped. They do have a top 10 roster. They do have a lot of depth at a ton of positions, but there's just too many distractions and too much weirdness in the air with them for me to see them making a Super Bowl run. The Denver Broncos are extremely underrated this year. Most analysts out there expect this to be one of the worst teams in the NFL this season. I've seen a good amount of mock drafts that have them picking in the top 5. And every year, there's always a team or two that's projected to be one of the worst in the NFL that end up overachieving. Prime example last year were the Buccaneers and the Houston Texans, and those two teams both made it to the postseason. The Broncos, I don't think they will be a playoff team per se, but they definitely will be competing for the 7th seed in the AFC this year. Bo Nix is going to prove to be an upgrade over Russell Wilson last year. Sean Payton has had success with every quarterback he's coached. He has a winning record without Drew Brees. He was 5-0 at one point on top of the NFC South with Jameis Winston his final season in New Orleans until he got his season cut short. He helped Teddy Bridgewater get paid by Carolina after being 5-1 as a starter and replaced Drew Brees when he was injured in 2019. And that was during a time of Teddy Bridgewater's career where not only did we have questions about if he could still play at the NFL level, but how was he going to be effective coming off the devastating leg injuries that he sustained in Minnesota. So if you can help Jameis Winston play the most efficient football of his career, you can revitalize Teddy Bridgewater's career, and you can find a way to win 9 games with Taysom Hill, Trevor Siemian at quarterback. You can win with Bo Nix. He is the perfect fit for Sean Payton's system. He gets the ball out fast, he plays well within the structure of the offense, and he has more athleticism to open up the playbook for Sean Payton and throw a different wrinkle to this Broncos offense that we haven't seen when they had Russell Wilson at the helm due to him diminishing, regressing, losing athleticism. The Broncos defense was not good statistically last year under Vance Joseph, but this was a defense that was good at getting key stops in critical moments of the games because they were one of the best teams in the NFL at forcing takeaways. This defense should be decent enough that with your offense improving, not going 3 and out every 30 seconds, this should help out the defense. So the Broncos, they got a low win total. People have them around 5 wins. I can see this being a 7-9 win team at best this year if everything works out and goes right with Bo Nix and Sean Payton. The Miami Dolphins, I don't see this being a playoff team this year. Losing Vic Fangio is one of the biggest reasons why I'm shorting the Dolphins this year. They got rid of Vic Fangio because he didn't get along with the players. The players felt like he was too soft. Well, he was too tough. He was an a-hole, but he improved that Dolphins defense from being one of the worst in the NFL to being a top 12 unit, despite the injuries that they had to some of their key players like Jalen Ramsey, Jalen Phillips, Bradley Chubb. And with him leaving, it shows me that the Dolphins as a team are just soft. They just have this oogly boogly kind of personality under Mike McDaniel where, you know, they want to have a loving environment there. They don't want to be too hard on the players. And that's why this is a team that consistently gets outclassed and outmatched when they have to play in cold weather games. They lack physicality. They lost 2 starters on the offensive line in free agency at guard. You lose your starting center as well. This is a team that is definitely in for huge regression this year. Tua got paid. I don't think he deserved all of that money. He's a top 10 quarterback, but with the losses that they suffered on their offensive line, it's going to be hard for them to overcome that. And this is a team that reminds me a lot of those Chip Kelly coached Oregon teams. You know, they're a track team. They're really fast, got a lot of speed, but they don't have the physicality that you need to go far in the playoffs. And I don't even see the Dolphins making it to the playoffs this year. I got them at 7-8 wins this season. That's why I have them being overhyped. The Los Angeles Chargers. This is one of the most underrated teams entering this season because people are judging this team based off talent and not based off the improvements that they've made with their coaching staff. You got Jim Harbaugh, who probably is the best head coach the Chargers have ever had in over the last 3 decades. He's won at every level, college, NFL. His first couple of years when he was coaching for the 49ers and his first 3 years coaching that team, he led them to 3 straight NFC Conference Championship appearances and the Super Bowl appearance as well. He won at Michigan, Stanford. Everywhere Harbaugh goes, he turns around that team, that organization, that program into a physical, hard-nosed team. The Chargers have a great offensive line. They got a good stable of running backs that with Greg Roman being their offensive coordinator, you know it's not a matter of if they're going to have an elite rushing attack. You know they're going to have an elite rushing attack because Greg Roman's track record, everywhere he's been great at getting the most out of the ground game with how advanced his run schemes are. The Chargers also, with Jesse Minter being their defensive coordinator, they're going to go from one of the most embarrassing defenses in the league to one of the best in only the span of a couple of months because Jesse Minter at Michigan had 2 of college football's best defenses in 2022 and 2023, and he's going to carry that over into the NFL because he already has an NFL background. He spent a couple of years coaching on the Ravens staff, so he already is acclimated to the NFL game. He already ran NFL concepts with his blitz packages. He's very aggressive, sends a lot of pressure, a lot of extra guys to get after the quarterback. This team all around has improved because of the hiring of Jim Harbaugh, and you give him Justin Herbert, one of the most premier quarterbacks in the game. This team is a lock to make it to the postseason. I don't get why so many people say this won't be a playoff team because they don't have good receivers or they're not that talented, where if you look at Jim Harbaugh's resume, he's never had elite wide receiver in play. That's not how he builds his teams. He builds his teams being tough up front and being a physical football team that wants to impose their will against you in the trenches, which the Chargers are going to be able to do this year because they're good up front on both sides of the football. As long as Justin Herbert doesn't get injured, they should win nothing less than 9 games at worst. The Las Vegas Raiders, they're overhyped to me just off the narrative that people think this can be an 8-9 win team again this year because of the success they had when Antonio Pierce took over as the interim head coach in replace of Josh McDaniels. But when you look at all of Antonio Pierce's wins last season, only one was against the team that had a winning record, and that's when they had that Christmas miracle and they beat Kansas City, not completing a single pass after the first quarter. You have one of the toughest schedules in the league this year. You're playing some of the NFL's best quarterbacks, Mahomes, Herbert twice. You got to play Joe Burrow, Lamar. You know, it's going to be hard to win games when you're handicapped at quarterback and you're saying that, yeah, we can win these games against these great quarterbacks and teams by just running the football, relying on great defense, when it's not 1999 or 1986 anymore. Unless you got the 86 Bears defense that you're going to be throwing out there, or the 2000 Ravens defense this season, you're not going to win a lot of games with that kind of philosophy. You need to have somewhat of some competent quarterback play to pull off some of these upsets. And until you end up getting a better quarterback, it's hard for me to see you not being one of the worst teams in the NFL this year. It's a quarterback-driven league. Yes, teams have been able to win and overachieve with backups at quarterback, like the Browns last year with Joe Flacco, but that's because they had an offensive-minded coach. Antonio Pierce is a defensive-minded coach, and he hired one of the worst offensive coordinators in the league in Luke Getsy, who was the same dude who people scapegoated for why Justin Fields didn't work out in Chicago last season to be their new OC. This team is going to be a complete disaster offensively. And despite how good their defense is, your defense gets put at a disadvantage when they have to play a lot of downs due to your offense being inept at being able to move the chains and keep drives alive. So the Raiders, to me, are a great value version of what the Pittsburgh Steelers have been under Mike Tomlin the last couple of years. Some of the more underrated teams this year, you know, the Seattle Seahawks. This is, to me, the NFL's biggest sleeper team walking into this year. You got Geno Smith at quarterback, but he wasn't the reason why Seattle didn't make it to the playoffs last year. What has held Seattle back the last couple of years has been that their defense has been one of the biggest disappointments in the NFL, despite how well they've drafted on that side of the football. You hire Mike Macdonald, who people are considering to be the offensive version of Sean McVay in the defensive light. Well, let me rephrase that. People are considering Mike Macdonald to be the defensive version of what Sean McVay is offensively. And with the talent Seattle already has, you got Devon Witherspoon, you got Leonard Williams, Boye Mafe, a lot of talent up front and depth on the defensive line and your pass rush that Mike Macdonald in year one as Seattle's head coach should be able to take that defense from being one of the worst in the league to one of the best in only the span of one offseason, just because how good he is with the defense. And this is a division, being the NFC West, that you have two of the NFL's best offensive minds in Kyle Shanahan, Sean McVay. We saw what Mike Macdonald's defense did to the 49ers when the Ravens just embarrassed them on Christmas last year. So if you can replicate the success that you had with Baltimore's defense, you're more than capable of being able to do the same with Seattle. Seattle has playmakers offensively. And Geno Smith, he's good enough to get you to the playoffs. If Baker Mayfield can take Tampa to the postseason, so can Geno Smith with the weapons that he has at receiver, DK Metcalf, Tyler Lockett, JSN. You got Kenneth Walker at running back. If your offensive line can be a little bit decent, this, without a doubt, to me, not only is a playoff team, but a team that is capable of being able to win the NFC West. The Buccaneers are overhyped because they had a good run winning this division the last couple of years with Todd Bowles at head coach is really impressive. And what he did last year was surprising to me because last year, at this time, most of us thought that the Buccaneers were going to be the worst team in the NFL or one of the worst. But you made a great hire with Dave Canales at offensive coordinator. He's gone to become the head coach of the Carolina Panthers. And you got a new OC in there and Liam Cohen, who comes from that McVay coaching tree. He spent the last couple of years mostly calling plays for the University of Kentucky. He had a good year with Will Levis in 2021. But outside of that, he hasn't really done anything noteworthy. And if you have followed Baker Mayfield's career, he's never consistently strung together two Pro Bowl level seasons. He'll have a Pro Bowl level season one year, and then he'll regress the following year after. That's why Cleveland traded him away in the first place. He was too up and down. He didn't have consistency. You can be a top 15 quarterback one year and the top 20 quarterback the following season. So I still need to see Baker Mayfield piece along two really good seasons back to back for me to be sold that the Buccaneers are consistently going to be a playoff team. And it's the same thing with Todd Bowles. Todd Bowles has had the most success he's ever had in his coaching career, and the Buccaneers still have struggled to win double-digit games. They won 9 games last year, and the final year with Brady, they barely got to 8. So for the Buccaneers, this team is not going to be a playoff team in my eyes, and I think they take a big step back this year. And lastly, I got the Carolina Panthers. I'm picking the Panthers to win the NFC South over the Atlanta Falcons. Dave Canales just has a different energy about him that I haven't felt from the last couple of head coaches the Panthers have hired since they fired Ron Rivera. He has been responsible for 2 of the NFL's biggest comeback stories the last 2 seasons. Revitalized Baker Mayfield's career last year, rejuvenated Geno Smith's career after serving as a backup for the last couple of years, and helped Seattle, become a playoff team. Everywhere Dave Canales has been, he's helped elevate the quarterback play, and I don't see why he can't do the same thing for Bryce Young. He was drafted first overall for a reason. Bryce Young carried Alabama. People think that Bryce Young was carried by the talent that Alabama had around him, where that shows me that you weren't watching Alabama football, or either you don't have a good understanding of college football, because the Bryce Young years that he played under Nick Saban were some of the worst teams that Alabama ever had. Bryce Young's final season, the only first-round pick he played with was Jahmyr Gibbs, and after he left, Nick Saban overhauled his coaching staff and changed his philosophy because he said they were too Bryce Young dependent. Bryce Young was cold when he was at Alabama, and probably the best quarterback that Alabama ever had in the history of their program. And with an improved wide receiving core, bringing in Deontay Johnson, Xavier Legette, you also improved the interior of your offensive line. This is a team that I trust more than the Atlanta Falcons. The Atlanta Falcons are weird. They got some weirdness going on with Michael Penix and Kirk Cousins. If Kirk Cousins struggles the first couple of games, how much pressure is on Raheem Morris to start Michael Penix when the fans start chanting for him? And Raheem Morris has been a head coach before. This is his second opportunity. A lot of second chance head coaches don't work out in the NFL that often unless you're Pete Carroll or Bill Belichick. So the Carolina Panthers are the team that I trust the most to win that division. And these are my most overhyped and most underrated teams entering this upcoming NFL season. Leave your thoughts down in the comment section down below. I got a few more topics that I want to hit on before I get up on out of here. For those of you guys that play fantasy football and you're considering drafting Anthony Richardson high to be your QB1 this year, you're making a huge mistake. I had a homeboy in this fantasy league that I'm in with all my high school friends that drafted Anthony Richardson with his 3rd round pick, which was absolutely insane because he could have had CJ Stroud, Joe Burrow, And I asked him, why did you draft Anthony Richardson that high? He told me that Anthony Richardson is going to have a year this year that's similar to Cam Newton's 2015 MVP season, and I thought he was absolutely out of his damn mind. I love Anthony Richardson, and I went to war a few months ago defending him, saying that he was being severely underrated. But somehow, from the time that I made that take to now, he now has went from being underrated to being heavily overrated and overvalued. This is a quarterback that has never played a full season of football. College, he didn't play a full season at Florida, and he didn't play all of his rookie season. He only played a handful of games due to that shoulder injury that he sustained early on during the season. And what Anthony Richardson needs, he didn't receive during his rookie season, which was meaningful reps throughout the regular season. With how raw he is as a quarterback, he's only going to get better with more games that he plays. And technically, his second year this year is pretty much the equivalent to his rookie season, because when you only play 4 or 5 games your first year, you're still raw. You still are new to the NFL game. And you still are going to have a lot of ups and downs that comes with Anthony Richardson being the starting quarterback for Indianapolis this year. And the reason why Anthony Richardson is such a risky pick from a fantasy football standpoint is that he's one of those quarterbacks that's going to be heavily volatile. He's going to have he's going to have games when he goes off and gives you 30, 25 points, wins you that week. And then he's going to have some games where he may only put up 6, maybe less than 10 points in certain games due to his inconsistency and his volatility as a passer. Prime example, look at his final preseason showing against the Cincinnati Bengals. He went 7-8 for his first couple of possessions. And then right after that, he went 1 of 7 and threw a pick 6 to Jordan Battle. That's the Anthony Richardson experience that you're going to see if you draft him in your fantasy football leagues, which is why drafting Anthony Richardson in fantasy football this year could cost you your fantasy league, because he's not going to give you consistent quarterback play on a week-to-week basis to make him a valuable starter for you. He's going to be heavily volatile. He's going to have some good games when he goes off for 4 touchdowns, and he's going to have some games where he may only score 2 touchdowns and have 4 turnovers in the process. And that's why I strongly advise against drafting Anthony Richardson if you have him being your quarterback run. He could be a good backup option, and if he shows that he can be consistent this year, then he's a really good option as far as QB1s in fantasy football. But I've seen this story way too many times with these really hyper-athletic quarterbacks like Justin Fields. I've had him a couple of years in fantasy football, and he costed me last year because he was inconsistent. He had games when he would score 30 points, and he had games when he didn't even get the 10 points. And when you're trying to win a fantasy football league, you need more consistent quarterback play than just a couple of 25, 30-point outings 4 or 5 weeks throughout the season. And then the most that you're getting out of them is like 10-point performances because the passing is just so inconsistent. And I'm not an Anthony Richardson hater, but I am somebody that is realistic about how good he's going to be this year due to how he got set back his rookie season and his development because of his injuries. So if you're playing fantasy football this year, please do yourself a favor and stay away from Anthony Richardson. He's too volatile to trust as your QB1 this year. Caleb Williams is going to give the Chicago Bears the best quarterback play this season that they've ever had in franchise history. I can't believe this is one of the NFL's most historic franchises. They've been around than the majority of other NFL teams, and yet they've yet to have a quarterback in the history of their franchise throw for more than 4,000 yards in the season. That's going to change this year with Caleb Williams at quarterback. You can make the argument that no rookie quarterback has entered as good as a situation as what Caleb Williams is walking into in his rookie season with the Bears. You got arguably the best receiving core in the NFL with DJ Moore, Keenan Allen, and Rome Odunze. Let's not also forget about Cole Kmet, who's coming off the best season of his career last year. Your offensive line should be fairly improved. And you also got an offensive coordinator in Shane Waldron, who worked a few years with Russell Wilson, and Caleb Williams kind of has a similar playing style to what Russell Wilson did during his prime years in Seattle. So the fact that you hire Shane Waldron, somebody who is familiar with working with quarterbacks that have this kind of skill set where they do a lot of improvising, is going to greatly help out Caleb Williams and his ability to succeed year one in Chicago. I also love that even if you do have games where Caleb Williams kind of struggles, you have a defense that should be good enough to help bail him out and give this offense some time in certain games to get going. So for Caleb Williams this year, I'm expecting him to throw for well over 4,000 yards, probably have 30 passing touchdowns to only 9-10 interceptions, and he'll probably have a couple of rushing touchdowns, maybe 5 or 6, 400 rushing yards. When I watched him in the preseason, he looked exactly like how I thought he would when he was coming out of USC. And that was a more refined version of what Patrick Mahomes was when he was coming out of Texas Tech. Better, more comfortable in the pocket, pretty good going through his progressions. And he just made all kinds of magical throws all throughout the action that he played in the preseason when he was getting outside his pocket, making a bunch of impressive off-platform throws. Like, Caleb Williams is good inside the pocket, but he's at his best when things break down and he has to create out of structure. And with the concerns that we have about Chicago's offensive line, his skill set is going to greatly help out that unit, and he's going to give you something that you didn't get when you had Justin Fields at quarterback, which is somebody that you can trust to win you games in the fourth quarter. As much as Bear fans love Justin Fields, what they don't want to admit is that he was awful in the fourth quarter. This was somebody that, from the span of him being the starter from 2021 to now, he was the worst fourth quarter quarterback when it came to taking care of the football. He led the NFL in fourth quarter turnovers. He had the worst fourth quarter completion percentage in the National Football League for over the last 3 years. Anytime you got in a situation that you needed Justin Fields to deliver you a game-winning drive, he always choked. Caleb Williams is different. He has a different aura, a different mentality around him that when the game's on the line and you need him to drive down the field to deliver you a game-winning touchdown to beat the Packers, he can get it done. His accuracy, how well he throws the football with anticipation, is what separates him from Justin Fields. Justin Fields is one of those dudes that you need a great offensive line that can give him all day to throw, and you need receivers that can get open fast because he's not going to throw guys open. Caleb Williams throws the ball in a way that it helps receivers not only get yards after catch, but it makes playing receiver a lot easier when you have somebody that has great ball placement on his throws that Caleb Williams has. You Bears fans are not about to recognize the kind of quarterback play that you're going to get this year out of Caleb Williams because you've never had a quarterback this good before. I'm expecting Caleb to have the same impact year one that Andrew Luck did when he got drafted by the Indianapolis Colts. This is one of those kinds of players that truly lives up to the generational label because he changes the fortunes of your franchise. You've never had a truly elite quarterback. The best quarterback play that you've gotten in recent years was that year you went to the playoffs and you had the double doink with Mitchell Trubisky and Jay Cutler when you lost to the Packers in the NFC Championship 14 years ago. Caleb Williams is easily going to give the Bears something they've never had before, which is high-end, elite quarterback play this year. And I expect him after this season concludes to be considered a top 10 quarterback in the league. And anything less than that would be a major disappointment, considering the expectations that was placed upon him when he got drafted #1 overall by Chicago. So I am a big believer in Caleb Williams. I've been watching him ever since he came in after halftime against Texas and the Red River Shootout. And I've just been a huge fan of his. I think that he's been getting way too much hate that's been undeserved. And I can't wait to see him tear up the NFL this year. I'm a huge fan of Caleb Williams. This is probably one of my favorite players to watch. And he hasn't even played a single snap in the NFL yet officially. But Bears fans, you guys got a good one. The last thing I want to talk about is this. If I were to ask you, who are you picking to have the #1 seed in the AFC this year come playoff time, what team would you pick? A lot of you all probably are going to go with the Ravens, the Chiefs, maybe the Bengals or the Bills, but my pick to be the #1 seed in the AFC for this season is going to be the Houston Texans. To me, the Texans, top to bottom, are the most complete team in this conference. They got a stacked defense. This should easily be a top 10 unit. They got Danielle Hunter, Will Anderson. Both of those guys could easily have double-digit sacks this year for Houston. You got a great secondary. Jalen Petrie is the most underrated defensive player in the NFL. Nobody talks about how good Jalen Petrie is. A lot of y'all, if I were to ask you, who are your top 5 safeties in the league, you can't even name more than 3 at best. Jalen Petrie is going to be in that discussion at the end of this year. Derek Stingley, I felt he was more talented than Sauce Gardner when he was coming out of the draft. And when he got fully healthy last year, he was a top 3 corner in the game. He easily not just could be the best cornerback in the NFL this year, but he could be in the conversation to be one of the very few defensive backs to win Defensive Player of the Year. That's how good Derek Stingley is going to be. So you're going to have a top 10 defense as well with the top 10 offense. I mean, Houston's receiving core is simply unfair. You should never be allowed to have 2 of the NFL's premier route runners on the same roster. But you have that now when you acquire Stephon Diggs in that trade with the Buffalo Bills and you pair him up with Tank Dell. One of these dudes is going to be open at least every single play C.J. Stroud drops back to throw the ball. You also have Nico Collins, one of the best one-on-one 50-50 ball wide receivers in the game. You got Joe Mixon. He is up there in age, but he's going to be an improvement at running back from what you had in Devin Singletary, who at best was above average back. Joe Mixon is still very good at making guys miss after contact. He does have pretty good vision. And behind the offensive line that should be slightly improved this year, Houston's offense is going to be no worse than a top 10 unit. And at best, this could be the NFL's #1 offense this year. I don't see how C.J. Stroud doesn't win MVP this year. This is a kind of roster that you could only build on Madden. You got a good running back. You got elite receiving core. And if your offensive line improves, which you were battered up last year on the offensive line, you had like several guys get injured like around week 4, week 5 of last year. If you can stay healthy and you improve in that area, I easily see the Texans finishing with a 14-win record and clinching that first round bye come playoff time and making it to the Super Bowl. In terms of being good top to bottom, having really no holes, no weaknesses, it doesn't get better than the Houston Texans. How many areas of concern do the Texans have? Only their offensive line, that's it. And the Ravens have the same concern with their offensive line. They have a lot of new faces who are going to be starting on their offensive line this year due to the departures that they had this offseason. So if you consider the Ravens to be the best team in the NFL, I don't get how you wouldn't have the Texans in that same conversation, even if you disagree with me about them finishing with the #1 seed in this conference this year. Because Kansas City, from a talent standpoint, isn't as good as what the Texans are. And there aren't too many other teams that are as good as what the Texans are from a complete standpoint of, they're going to have elite defense and elite offense. Most teams have one or the other. They either have above average offense and elite defense, or elite offense and a lackluster defense. With the Texans, you could be one of the rare teams that is top 10 on both sides of the ball. You got a great coach in D'Amico Ryans. Your offensive coordinator is more than likely going to be a head coach next season. The Texans have the stars perfectly aligned, not just to become the best team in the AFC this season, but to make a deep playoff run and potentially win the Super Bowl. CJ Stroud is in ascension mode. He's in his second season, and we already consider this dude to be a top 5, top 7 quarterback in the game. Imagine how good he's going to be this year. He potentially could be competing with Patrick Mahomes for the title as the best quarterback in the NFL with a supporting cast that he has this year. Elite offense, elite defense. There's no way Houston, to me, doesn't end up winning the title as the best team in the AFC conference for the 2024 NFL season. This is it for this episode of the JT Sports Podcast. I appreciate all of you guys for tuning in. Before you guys leave up on out of here, do me a favor. Give the JT Sports Podcast a 5-star review. If you enjoyed this episode, you can find us on Apple and Spotify. All you got to do is type in the JT Sports Podcast, or you can go down to the description down below, and there will be the links to the Apple and Spotify versions of the podcast. Share it with your friends, family members, and acquaintances. Hit that like button, subscribe, turn on post notifications if you're watching on YouTube so you don't miss when we go live and upload new content. If you're listening on X, hit that follow button, retweet the stream. We'll greatly appreciate it. And what we have moving forward, tomorrow I'm going to be giving you guys my official college football week 1 predictions. We're also going to break down a couple of games, look into a few big storylines of those matchups. And on Saturday night, we're going to be live streaming after the game, hopefully with a guest, all my reactions to week 1 of the college football season. So make sure that you guys are tuned in. Turn on post notifications so you don't miss when we drop new content. I appreciate everybody that tuned in to this episode, and I will see you guys shortly with another